Study of three forces in oneself. We have ease of access and opportunity in observing ourselves, rather than observing the external world such as we know it. We live very little in the external world, which is foreign to us, and are intermittently aware of it, but notice very little. We can pass the same house 1,000 times and be unable to describe it. We are actually far more permanent even for ourselves than is this world. This is one reason why the study of three forces begins with self-observation. One must remember that a force is invisible, and our more direct contact with what is invisible is by means of self-observation. It must also be understood that in trying to study this question of forces, we are not studying things. A desire is a force, not a thing. A train of thought is a force, but not a thing. An idea is a force, not a thing. One reason why we have so much difficulty in understanding three forces is that we tend to see in everything one force. We think of force as one, and in everything that happens, in any manifestation, in any event, we tend to see merely one force. We attribute it all to one force. We see one action in one event. This is partly due to our inability to think of more than one thing at a time as a rule. Sometimes we think in terms of two things, but to think in terms of three things is beyond us, it is beyond formulary thought. An event, for instance, must always be good or bad, right or wrong for us. We see only one action in it, and further we do not even think of events being due to forces. We see an apple falling from the tree, and merely see the apple now lying on the ground. We see a magnet attracting or repulsing one pole of a compass. We see it all, but scarcely think of forces, in this case obviously different kinds of forces. Nor do we notice how forces change for us. At one moment we are attracted by a thing, and the next moment repelled by that same thing. Or we are repelled, and then an idea comes to us, and we suddenly feel attracted. We do not realize that the thing at one time conducts one force, and at another time an opposite one. In the same way our relationship to a person changes. The person undergoes a change of sign for us, and this means that in the triad of forces that produce the relationship, there has been a change of forces. Mechanical love can turn into hate, mechanical trust to suspicion, and so on. All such ordinary manifestations in human life are due to forces, and to changes in these forces. At this level, we are not asked to designate the forces, but simply to notice them. The three forces cannot be studied theoretically. The only practical way of studying their action in ourselves is by doing something. By this is meant imitating or personifying in ourselves one of the three, in relation to some other force, either 1. Acting, in ourselves, or 2. In external events. Example: 1. Struggle with habits. Struggle with suffering. Struggle with ignorance, and so on. 2. Struggle with the expression of unpleasant emotions towards someone that one mechanically dislikes. Struggle to carry out some difficult task. In this way, we can begin to realize what second force is for us in each case, and from this can begin to catch a glimpse of third force. For instance, a sudden accession of force that assists one's struggle with a particular task means a change in the quality of the neutralizing force. Encouragement can have this effect. The active force in the triad is thus increased, and the task, the second force, may be more easily accomplished. On the other hand, it may weaken active force, by creating the imagination that one is able to do the task, so that the task becomes active, the resisting force becomes strongest. In speaking of the ray of creation, and connecting it with our thoughts in some way, we can admit that the universe is created, and many believe that it is. They say, if they are for example religious, that God created the universe. They have also heard of the Trinity if they are Christians, and may or may not have thought about it. In any case, the idea of the creation of the world by God, and some vague notion of a Trinity may exist in their minds. But no connection is made. Even if they have thought that creation is in some way connected with the Trinity, they do not see the inevitable consequence of three wills at work in creation. They merely think that God created everything as it were, all round him, like a lot of toys, and that no laws were at work, although in the allegorical account of creation from Genesis, we are told that the universe was created on successive days, but do not think that any scale is implied here, that creation is not all at the same level, but descends in order of degrees, lower and lower. Consequently, We are inclined to think that God's will is directly in touch with, and in charge of everything created. We omit to think of the meaning of the Trinity, the primal three forces or three wills that bring about creation, and assume that the will of God reaches every created thing directly. Some religions teach only the unity of God, such as the Islamic faith. The Christian religion teaches the Trinity. The psychological consequences are great. If people believe only in God, they think that God's will is done everywhere, and in everything, so tending easily into fanaticism, persecution, and so on. Not that Christianity can show anything much different, but at the same time this religion contains the idea of the Trinity, which comes between God and the world. The connection of God, or the Absolute, and the process of creation, can only be understood through the Trinity or primal triad of three forces, and the derivation of subsequent triads. As stated in antiquity, God is difficult to understand, for he is first one, then three, and then seven. To return to the ray of creation, the first triad of three forces proceeds from the Absolute, and creates the first order of worlds, which is under three laws, the three wills of the primal triad. This is the first act of creation represented in the illustration. It is a living, organic process, inconceivable and eternal. By the term World 3, is meant the first level of creation, subject to three laws or three wills. This world creates in turn another order of worlds below it, which has three forces of its own. This is called World 6, because it is under three wills or laws acting on it from World 3. The process of creation then continues. The next order of worlds is World 12, having three forces of its own, 6 derived from World 6 and 3 derived directly from World 3. In a similar way, 3 further worlds are created, making in all 6 orders of worlds or 6 descending levels of creation below the Absolute, all synchronized through law. The process of creation halts at World 96, for a reason that will be explained when the law of 7, or law of order of creation is given. World 96, at the termination of the ray of creation, is under 96 laws. This world, or this order of worlds, is furthest from the Absolute, and under the greatest density of laws. The further the process of creation proceeds from the Absolute, the greater the number of laws. What it is necessary to grasp is that creation necessarily implies laws, and this arises from the very fact that three forces are necessary for any manifestation. There can be no creation without laws, and this means that every created thing is inevitably under laws, nothing is created free. If we now consider this vertical line of creation, we see that if we could ascend, then we would pass under fewer and fewer laws, we would gain more and more freedom. Whereas if we were to descend or backslide, then we would pass under more and more restrictions, and so be less and less free. If a creature, a being, is created at the level of World 12, it finds itself under 12 laws, or orders of laws. If it falls to the level of World 48, it is now under 48 laws. Man, such as he is at a certain level in the ray. But we are created in such a way that we can change our level upwards, or downwards, and so pass under fewer laws or even more laws. The next point to consider is that the laws, forces, wills, or influences, coming down the ray, have different sources. If we take World 48, we can see that certain laws reach World 48 directly from World 3, some directly from World 6, and so on. That is to say, a being, born in World 48 is under 48 laws, or orders of laws. But these laws are not of the same quality. Some come from higher levels and some from lower levels. A person, if they know how to, can put themselves under one kind of influences or another kind. The next point is that creation is forcible, it is brought about by force. It begins with the work of the primal triad of three forces derived from the Absolute, and continues through the reduplication, again and again, of further triads of three forces. The penultimate or last point of creation, World 96, is under many forces. This means enormous forces are locked up in creation. Through the action of the law of three, the universe is wound up. Sometimes in nature we can see these forces unwinding themselves, as for instance in the element radium. We can now view the visible universe from the standpoint of the principle of the ray of creation. We know that the visible universe in its greatest magnitude is made up of a vast number of immense star systems, of which our Milky Way is but one. We must conceive that the first act of creation is comparable with making a general tenuous formation of all possible systems, which are filled in by increasing condensation. This we call World 3, or all possible systems of worlds. Since we wish to find the position of our Earth in creation, we must take next our system of worlds, which has separated from the primal mass, namely our starry galaxy or Milky Way, which is World 6. Out of this we can take our solar system or Sun, which is World 12. The planetary mass formed from the Sun, its solar system, would then be World 24, of which we take our separated planet or Earth, as World 48, from which our Moon is derived, and is therefore World 96. This is our ray of creation. Our Moon is the terminal point of that branch of that total tree of the universe in which our Earth appears. We can note here, that so far, there is no appearance of mankind in the ray. The entire ray is evolving. Every part of it seeks to rise higher in the scale of creation. The Moon is not a dead planet, but the youngest point of our ray. Any organism or organization, for example, reflects to some extent the principle of the ray of creation. So take any organized body of people, say the military, and suppose that a general is at its head, a colonel next, major, captain, and then the company of soldiers fall under this chain of command. How many laws is a soldier under? He is under the laws of the captain, who is under the laws of the major, who is under the laws of the colonel, who is under the laws of the general. But the laws of the general can reach the soldier directly, or the laws of the colonel can reach the soldier directly, and so on. From all this we can see, 1, that the part is always under more laws than the whole, and, 2, that the laws that each part falls under, come from different sources or origins. Continuing then this brief analogy. The soldier is under the laws of the captain, but may also attract the attention of the major. He will then pass under the laws of the major. He may even attract the attention of the general. In such a case he may then pass out of the laws of the colonel. Taking by analogy, our body, which is again constructed on the principle of the ray of creation. It is an organization, or organism, and all organisms obey the law of creation. We know that our body as a whole is one thing. It is then divided though into many systems, vascular, digestive, lymphatic, nervous, and so on. Each again is subdivided into groups of parts, until the smallest parts of the body are reached. This is reaching a part, via the principle of the ray of creation, namely of increasing laws. For a rough illustration, take the muscles of your little finger. They are under their own laws, and then under the laws of the hand, and the hand is under the laws of the arm is under the laws of the muscular system in general, and your muscular system is a part of many other systems which finally form our body as a whole. This rough illustration is to demonstrate how, from the top and on downward, increasing laws exist, and in this regard, it shows the principle of the ray of creation, the principle of increasing laws from above downward. And this, it should be understood, is the nature of things. It is a fundamental law of creation.